And let's get going. I mean, we're all busy people, and Katie's certainly busy. And so, well, welcome everyone. Simon Rosenberg from Hopium Chronicles. Welcome to what is going to be an increasingly number of live events. We've just started doing these, but it's now part of the sort of core of the Substack platform. I asked Katie to come on today because I did spend some time with her when she was at MSNBC, and I always thought
Yes.
she was a very thoughtful and generous host. And she's now on a journey, a new chapter. And Hopium in our community, part of my own arrival in this place, a couple of years ago, Katie, was that during the 2022 cycle, I was arguing all the time that we needed to beef up the pro-democracy media space. I was running a think tank at the time, and I decided after the election that I needed to walk the walk. And so I shut down a think tank that I'd been running for 27 years, and I jumped into Substack. And so the Hopium community launched in March of 2023. We're 150,000 people now, plucky, proud patriots.
Amazing. Amazing.
And so you've also now made the jump. And I just
Yes.
wondered if you could just talk to us about going from what we call legacy media, into this new independent journalism space. Your thoughts about it in its early days. Reflect for us a little bit about how it's going.
Well, thank you for allowing me to join you and your amazing followers and viewers that are watching now and that'll watch later. I kind of feel like Simon, we have to do the 4 score and 7 years ago. Simon Rosenberg was the original veteran frontiersman when it comes to Substack. Um, and it's one of the most thoughtful questions that anybody has asked me since I have ventured into independent media. I've gotten obviously the questions, how are you feeling, et cetera, but it is an adjustment. I'm still going through a transition time. There was a kind of a regular routine that I had when I was still working in mainstream media at MSNBC. But the most liberating part about being on Substack is you and I can have a substantive long form conversation for as short or as long, that we would like to do. But then once we're done talking, if I'm inspired by the conversations I have with you and other followers that we have on Substack, I can plop down and drop a quick note, or I can do a substantive post. And it's become almost like a journaling experience for me, which is very cathartic for me as well. I explained to somebody the other day that on MSNBC, I had only 1 day a week to be able to do my show, not by choice. I would have loved to have more of an opportunity. And in that 1 hour of live TV, I only had about 42 minutes of talk time. But for me, it was always important to be able to give space and real estate to the experts so they can make all of us smarter. And so I had to be so judicious about with whom I was speaking and the topics about which we were spending time. And in this space, I can kind of memorialize my thoughts by way of you and I on video on a Substack Live, or when I write something. And albeit you are the quintessential exceptional writer, Simon, I am not. But Substack is a very forgiving community. People appreciate the time that it takes to be able to kind of reduce what we're feeling and what we're thinking into words and onto paper. And so I've been very grateful for the reception I've received thus far.
And talk about how you're structuring it, right? You've got your Substack. You're also doing work, I think, with other organizations too.
Yeah. So I'd like to say my home base is Substack. My home base has become Substack, even though you will still see me post on other social media apps such as Blue Sky, et cetera. But my home base is Substack. But then I'm also about to launch a YouTube channel with the guys from the Midas Touch Network. And I'll be actually taking what was the Katie Phang show, and I will make a very new iteration of that on YouTube. And so I'm trying to meet people where they are. Some people may not be on Substack. Why they're not, I'm not sure. They need to come here and hang out with us. But I'd like to also be on YouTube because it is truly a place where I have learned, people get their media consumption a lot from YouTube. And so I'm looking forward to being able to do that with the guys from Midas.
Yeah, the Midas guys are good friends of ours, and I've been a regular guest with them for a long time. I mean, the very first event I ever did with Ben was in February of 2023. I actually hosted
Yeah.
him to give them more exposure because people in Washington didn't really know who they were, right? I mean, there were these West Coast YouTube dudes, right? And now we all know that these kinds of media is really where all of this is moving. And part of the reason I think that I was able to see all this is that I have 3 Gen Z kids, and they're
Oh,
24, 22, and 19. And I know that the way they consumed information was largely through what we call influencers, or
Mhm.
people that became their coaches or their teachers or their community. My oldest son built his first computer at 15 years old because he watched Linus Tech Tips, right? And which is this show that no one's ever heard of, who's not
Yeah.
their age, but Linus became this teacher to him and it was really critical. And so I think what we're learning, those of us who are not as young as Gen Z kids, is that this space is so much more open and fruitful and creative, and deeply rewarding. I mean, uh I think the work I've done on Substack the last 2 years has been the most rewarding, fulfilling work that I've done in politics in my, over 30 years in the business. And I so welcome. The water is warm. Let us know how we can continue to promote your work as you go through this journey. And I'm excited to be sending people your way to your show you're doing with Midas Touch. It's really exciting.
Thank you. And I'm also very proud that I think I found the next chapter in my journey with the perfect marriage of my work as a trial lawyer for 20 something years and then my work in media, because I'm also going to be working for the Democracy Defenders. And with other pro democracy litigation organizations to be able to be back in court with Norm Eisen. And I'm also partnering with Norm and Jen at The Contrarian. So you'll also be seeing me do a lot of work with them. And so the way that I envision myself now is I am doing a lot of collaboration and partnership. And what I love about that, Simon, is that um, the mainstream media ecosystem can be incredibly toxic and incredibly competitive. It makes sense. There's not as much real estate available for everybody to be able to have a piece of the pie. And I think what has been wonderful is the idea of collaborating and partnering with other people is for the sheer purpose of making our community and our worlds better. Period. End of story. And so in independent media, there's no fear that I am giving up a part of myself when I spend time with others in a way that diminishes my value. In fact, the more that I spend time with others, the more that we contribute together, the better that we are all going to be. Why? Because this is a collective fight. I cannot emphasize how important it is that people are taking their talents and their time to be able to benefit everyone, frankly, whether you're a Republican or not. We are doing this to make this country a better place. And that is why I'm incredibly excited that I can do all of this and be with all of these people and not be somebody's exclusively owned talent in any way. I can now be able to kind of give what I can give. And I like to call it the highest and best use of Katie Phang. I'm giving that to you in whatever capacity you want to use me for. And we're doing something and we're building something together.
Well, it's funny. I often, in the Hopium community, often say that I'm grateful that they've given me the opportunity to find my highest and best use at this time of enormous challenge for the country. And so
Yeah.
this idea of finding your highest and best use through this new creative independent media world, welcome. The water is warm, Katie. We're glad you're here. And but let's talk about the other big thing, is part of the Katie story, which is
Yeah.
Trump's abandonment of the constitutional order, this kind of extraordinary moment that we're in as a country, unprecedented, where, most of the country is still operating under rule of law and in our constitutional order. But the executive branch, particularly the White House and his enablers in Congress, have decided that that thing called the Constitution doesn't really apply to them and that they can do whatever they want. And we're seeing this incredible assault on the constitutional order that is still breathtaking in its scope and scale. And I just wondered if you could also reflect on that, that as somebody who was in the courtroom for all these years, who's deeply versed in understanding rule of law and the constitutional order and the whole theory behind all this, where are we right now?
So we're in an incredibly precarious situation where we are, I believe, and not to be, melodramatic about it, but we are one step away from a total and complete, I think, destruction of the constitutional idea that there are co-equal branches of government. I think that we are hanging on by a thread, which is why it's so important for all of us to continue to speak up and speak out about the injustices that we witness and what we're seeing happen in real time. I am about to turn 50 very soon. August 1st, I'll be turning 50. And I have a 10-year-old daughter. And I always say, Simon, that I am stunned that I have a child that now lives in a country where the exhibition of behavior from the Oval Office is shameful. It would never be tolerated in my household, but he does act worse than a toddler. But it's not just bad behavior. A lot of us could countenance bad behavior. We'll say he's ill-mannered or he wasn't raised properly. But what's happening is he's creating a new precedent, and that's what I fear the most. It's not just what he's destroying along the way, it's the example and the precedent he's starting now moving forward. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to kind of highlight and educate people to understand that this is not only normal, but this is not acceptable. And frankly, it's just straight up illegal what we're seeing happening. I understand the frustration, though, when I speak to people and I read the messages. Well, Katie, that's all, fine that you're doing this, but, why is there no consequence for what he's doing? And I share your frustration. If it were me, I would be slapping a whole bunch of people with sanctions already, and I'd be hauling people to jail because the thing that frustrates people the most, Simon, is there is a total and complete discrepancy in the way that he and others are being treated versus the average American. The average American would have to comply with a court order. An average American would not have a lawyer go to court and say, to hell with it. I don't give a shit what you said on the bench, judge. We're just going to kind of do it the way we want to do it. And so I share your frustration. It's not that there aren't solutions, Simon. It's just in the meantime, we have to almost walk this tightrope between respecting how things used to be and how people are trying very hard, like the Titanic, to turn toward this kind of newer, kind of fresher, kind of more aggressive way of handling this man and his wrecking ball of an administration. It's hard to turn people, Simon. It's hard. It's hard to give people a belief that there is something newer and better out there. But that's what I think part of my role is. It's, yes, I grew up in the established traditional norms and institutions, but those are being destroyed along the way. So I'm ready to step up and do something a little bit different. And that's part of the reason why I left MSNBC. I will be very clear. I haven't said this yet on Substack anywhere or whatever. I left my contract. I had a contract with MSNBC. I left it. They may have canceled my show, but I was invited to stay and I left. And I left because I felt like it was way too damn important to be able to use my voice in a way that was going to be effective. And that's the reason why I left.
Well, that's an incredible story. And by the way, thank you for doing that. And thank you for being here. I mean, we need, I want to say that, I have this concept that I write about at Hopium called that the circle of defiance is growing. And, people like you taking that step, right? Where you may not have done that, before, but every little step that we take and every day there is more defiance of him, right? We get stronger and he gets weaker. And you joining into this pro-democracy movement is our circle of defiance is growing. The election of the Pope was our circle of defiance grew a lot in the last couple of days, right?
They elected a reposting Pope is what they did, and his reposts have been wild on social media from before. So yeah,
I mean the idea that somehow we ended up with a Pope who has been a Twitter critic of Trump and JD Vance aggressively, right? Of all the things that we could have imagined the Pope would have been, I think that was probably the last thing. But I think your story is a sign that the circle of defiance is growing and that, that we're getting bigger. And I will tell you that when I reflect on where we are, a couple observations. One is I've been stunned with how universal Trump is getting defeated in the courts. And it's because they are operating as if the Constitution doesn't exist, right? So
yes.
If in that system of courts and rule of law and the Constitution, they're getting routed in the way that he got routed after the court cases after 2020, right? Where he didn't win virtually any of those cases. They're just losing again and again and again. And this issue of winning and losing, I think, is a very important part of our story that we have to tell, is that he's not strong in winning, he's weak in losing, right? But the other thing that I think is going to become increasingly important is not just the separation of powers and the courts, but federalism itself. And I think the state and local governments are going to play an increasingly important role over time. The Democratic AGs have been incredible in challenging, and they're challenging them not from a place of a nonprofit, right? Or a set of plaintiffs, but they're challenging them from a place of a government, right, of the United States. And so I think that one of the things we've learned, I think, and I'd love your thoughts about this, is that it's perhaps our system has proven to be more resilient, and that the muscle memory of democracy in the American people perhaps is a little bit stronger than we all, anticipated. And then I think Trump has to be unbelievably frustrated with how badly he's getting beat in court.
Yeah, I said to Tim Miller the other day on his podcast, I said it's bullshit for anybody to think that Donald Trump isn't being told the truth by his lawyers as to the losses. He knows. He likes to pretend and lie to Americans and say, "Oh, that's not what my lawyers told me," or "No, that's not what's happening." But we all know that he knows, and he's a bitter old man about it, and that's why he continues to lash out the way that he does. But I love this concept of muscle memory when it comes to democracy. I find that more and more people are realizing that democracy is not some random concept that they only read about in a textbook when they were studying civics when they were growing up. Democracy has very real, very practical, very tangible impacts on your daily life. And I think that perhaps, ironically, because we've had to suffer through Trump, we're now realizing just how beautiful and fragile democracy can be. There's a lot that we take for granted, Simon, and I think that's definitely something that we have. But instead of saying in a defeated way, you know what? The cause is lost, the damage has been done, and we just, skulk away. People are defiantly, to your point, rising up and saying, either judges or people in the streets, et cetera, they're saying, this is not going to happen on my watch. And that's exactly what motivates me to want to continue to speak out. And now in a super unadulterated way, it's, look, these things impact me. I feel them as well. I may be in a place of privilege that is different than someone else, but it doesn't mean that I'm not moved to action. The call to action is different for different people. And your contribution, you may think is not big, and yet it's a contribution. And I feel like the collective kind of contributions that are being made by people speaking up and being angry, that it's moving the needle in significant ways. And I get it, we're results-oriented people. And so I'm proud when I see certain organizations like Norm and Mark Elias going to court and fighting and winning. And I'm also proud, though, when I look and I see, just the faces of people going to the rallies with AOC and Bernie. I mean, these are things also that I wasn't able to do before. When I was working for mainstream, I wasn't able to go to a political rally because it would be deemed to be too political for me to go. Now I can go, and now I can use my voice in a different way. And so, again, it's very liberating to be on the side of independent journalism, but it's also very comforting to know that there's a whole bunch of people here. I mean, look how many people have tuned in just right now, Simon, to spend time with us that are here and saying, we're here together, because you can't discount the value of that feeling, the feeling of us having a true community.
Well, and this is a really important point, is that I think that part of what's happened in the last few months is that a lot of our political action in recent years, because of COVID, was Zoom based and internet based, and and it was effective, right? Like, I mean, we raised tons of money, and I was doing, we do Zooms with tens of thousands of people, and all those things that happened. But now people are going back out into the public, and they're
Yep.
connecting physically in ways that is a very new phase, I think, of our movement. And to your point, what I have found in our community at Hopium is that this has been very affirming for people to be in physical community, to be outside with other people, to see that it's not just a thing like this, a Substack Live, but to be with real people. And I think the Bernie AOC rallies, the Tesla takedowns, the hands off events, these have been very important. And one of the things, Katie, that I think is really important for us to say when we talk about this is that there hasn't been a single incident. There have been millions and millions and millions of people out in the streets for months now, and nothing significant has happened. They've been peaceful, they've been respectful, they've been joyful, and I do think that what you're seeing is that the American people themselves, to your point, I think we're going through a very powerful lesson about why this country was founded in the first place and why we set up a political system that did not want to have a guy like Trump running the country. We had a pretty good run for almost 240 years before he came along. But I think that what you're seeing is that people are grow not the circle of defiance is growing, but also individual people are finding their own power. And it's been very kind of an awesome thing to witness, from where I'm sitting and affirming to your point in every way in our democracy right now.
I'd like to quickly share the other night, I was a part of a panel in Miami for a town hall on immigration. It was open to the public. It was at the University of Miami on their campus. The main driver of that town hall, Simon, was former Florida Congresswoman Debbie Mucarsel Powell. Now, Debbie just ran against Rick Scott and lost, which was such a shame. It was such a loss for not only our country, but for Florida specifically. But Debbie's another great example of your message of hope combined with defiance. She could have just said, "I'm done. I've served. I tried. I didn't get elected. I'm done." She said no. She says, "I want to mobilize the people. I want them to be educated." So she gets a lot of us together, immigration lawyers, from the Immigrant Council, from the Catholic Services, Legal Services, right? They get and a local city mayor who has sued Ron DeSantis over the partnership agreements between the federal
Yeah.
authorities and the local authorities, right? And me, little me. And what you heard though was an education component of the town hall. What's the status of the legal cases on immigration? What are my rights if I'm stopped on the street? And then there was the town hall component of it, Simon, which was a line of people who stood up and waited to speak. The emotion that came from people talking about how young woman said, "I left Cuba so I didn't have to walk around with my papers and have to show them upon demand." She's like, "What's the difference between Cuba or here if I have to live like that?" She's like, "I'll never live like that." She goes, "I might be arrested for it, but I won't live like that." You hear these messages, and to your point, that's one voice, one woman, just her. And yet she spoke like that, and you could feel it. That's the stuff that we need to continue to lift up. Listen, the people in Congress, they're important because they're, at least on the Democrat side, not the Republicans, they're the ones that are promulgating and creating these laws. The lawyers are important, right? And the judges, because they're in the courts battling this out. But Simon, we need to continue to lift the voices of just regular people every day that are impacted by what's happening with this administration, because their stories resonate so much more sometimes than maybe the stuff we're hearing from DC.
Listen, amen to that. And one of the things we try to do at Hopium is share, we have a chat every day for our paid subscribers where people self-report all the actions they're taking all from all over the country, hundreds of people every day. And people we learn together about what people are doing, and people share scripts of phone calls they're making and stories that were effective. And it's taught me a lot. I'm learning a lot. And I try to showcase that work inside of Hopium to give people inspiration that other people just like them, right, are taking these concrete actions and taking that next step and being big citizens, as I call it, to go out and fight for their country. And let me just throw out one idea before I let you go, Katie, is that
Sure.
I think that July 4th, we've been talking a lot inside of Hopium that we need to own the 4th. And what we
Mm.
mean by that is July 4th should be a painful day for Donald Trump. That day is a celebration of separating from a guy just like him, almost 250 years ago. We need to own the 4th and make it about our patriotism and his betrayal of the country. And you should, in your projects and as you talk, because you've been so vocal and visible in the last few weeks, we need to really use July 4th this time as a teaching tool for why it is that our founders wanted to build a country where someone like Donald Trump could never reign over us. And to make this a dark day for him, a painful day for him. And I just throw that out there as something for you to think about. We've been talking about that a lot in our community. And I think we got to own the 4th, as we call it, as we think about what we can do together over the next couple months.
I love that idea because I'm very angry that symbols that have meant so much to Americans for centuries are now being co opted by MAGA and far right. I always say the American flag, for example, has been co opted now and made to be something that we should fear, or and just even colors, right? We talk about the red hats, right? I mean, these are the things that we worry about when we see now, but I agree that there should be a taking back of our voices, and that includes the media. So what we do through independent media, through the work you're doing, Simon, and the work that I'm doing and continue to do, is we're we're marginalizing the hatred. If we build a big enough ecosystem in independent media, I want people to understand the impact of that. We don't have to be living and dying by the rating system of so many viewers watching Fox News, etc. Who gives a shit? If
Yeah.
we can own and build a large ecosystem in independent media, we will shove them out of the way and they will be so marginalized that they'll only be talking to each other. Now, I understand the idea of meeting people where they are, Simon, and I know that we need to reach some people, but I'm not reaching a MAGA viewer. They're not going to listen to me. Doesn't mean that I'm not going to continue to shout it from the rooftops, but I want to focus on the people that actually care about what happens to my country and
Yeah.
to my family. And so that's why I agree that whatever can be done, um, symbolically as well, to take something back that's been co-opted by the far right, that's what we need to do.
Katie, welcome. I mean, it's so great to have you here. I mean, I started my career in the media business and went over to politics. And I'm not saying you're in politics; you're in independent media, independent journalism. But thank you for becoming a warrior in this pro-democracy movement in this time of incredible challenge for the country. You're needed. You're loved. You could see the. I don't think I've ever done a Substack live where there's been so many hearts flying all the way. You're such a, people love to have you here, and so
I
welcome.
appreciate it.
And let me know. Let's stay in touch and let's see what else we can do together. I'll send you a write up on this owning the fourth concept so you can help, be an evangelist for this idea that we have this big opportunity in front of us. And it's not anything that any one of us will do. It's something that we all have to do together. But those of you who have understanding of the Constitution and have studied these things have a special role to play in these moments as teachers. And so, God bless in your new journey. It's great. And we'll be listen, everybody, as you're watching, please subscribe to Katie's Substack, and we will be promoting her program when it comes out with her show
Thank
with
you.
Midas Touch. And obviously, you can catch her a couple times a week on The Contrarian, right? And so keep fighting, Katie. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Simon, and my best wishes to your Katie on a successful exam. Please let her know I put the prayers and the
I
good
know.
energy up for her to have a great exam today. So there you
She
go.
she needs it. This was a hard one. And thank you, Katie. See you,
Thanks,
everybody.
guys. See everybody soon.